While connected technology is essential for unlocking new efficiencies on the production floor, it's also presented hackers with new opportunities to steal valuable IP and data. To support OT professionals in their battle with cyber criminals, we launched the Security Breach podcast. In each of our over 100 episodes, we've brought in cybersecurity specialists to provide valuable insights and break down critical topics. As a go-to podcast for our listeners, we want to help you align your brand with our expertise. By sponsoring our podcast, your brand will build trust, and your message will stand out to an audience searching for tools to assist their cybersecurity efforts. Secure your share in this rapidly growing segment by sponsoring Security Breach. Contact us today to learn more. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. The challenges facing the industrial OT landscape that emanate from external sources are varied, complex, and constantly evolving. Smarter hacking groups, AI-driven phishing schemes, and deceptive malware viruses head the list of concerns. And while these factors show no signs of fading, the reality is that there are just as many challenges facing industrial cybersecurity that are embedded within the very foundation of our operations. These legacy approaches have created internal battles that absorb valuable resources, waste precious talent, and help the bad guys stay a step ahead. With this in mind, we're going to tap into two key industry leaders to get their take on pressing internal liabilities that are ensuring key production assets remain exposed. Let's start with Silverfort's Rob Larsen as he discusses the ongoing struggles created by IT and OT silos.
Kind of a wise approach, which is really first kind of do no harm. And secondly, really understand that manufacturing is where companies really make money. And in that vein, you really have to take, I would argue, a really pragmatic approach to understanding not only how manufacturing works, but also figuring out how to tackle the risk problems and tackle the technical problems. And I think really it's about understanding first, right? And I would argue almost creating a relationship between the manufacturing engineering teams, the IT teams that are sort of outside of manufacturing, and the security teams that bridge both organizations and places. And that's, I think, it's what I've learned, certainly at General Motors. It was a huge value for me to understand the mechanical engineering team's work schedules and what they had to do inside those factories, and then begin to be kind of the white of the Oreo cookie and bridging the IT teams and the mechanical engineering teams together through what we called a kind of a manufacturing cybersecurity approach. And it took all three organizations to agree and drive forward in a common direction with common expectations.
You touched on a couple of really big topics there. I want to dive more into sort of this IT and OT getting together. We hear about this a lot. It's a huge issue because we've got these siloed organizations within the organization, if you will, and they don't always want to talk to each other. What did you experience in terms of breaking down some of those barriers and those walls? What did it take? Was it simply a mandate from management? Did somebody sort of extend the olive branch? What do you remember that being like?
I think the biggest issue was, walking a mile in somebody's shoes, right? It's really easy for the security people to come in and criticize all sorts of things. This isn't right, and that's not right. And the IT teams to come in and say, we don't support this and we don't support that. We just bring connectivity to the building, and anything inside that building is just not our purview. And to change that model, and for the ME teams to begin to realize that, hey, we're not just going to come in with a bunch of checklists and measure their failure, but really partner with them, create a shared taxonomy, create a shared plan, own some of that plan as opposed to watching them do work, which is sort of, sometimes it happens, right? Where the security team just kind of walks in with a clipboard and pen and starts sort of taking notes and tracking who's not doing what, right? And then there's a list of everything that's wrong. So I think that you have to flip the narrative. And one of my senior architects, both at HP and General Motors, talked about the give back model. And I really think it's a powerful model. And that is, if you're able to put, as a security professional, If you're able to put other people's needs above the security needs, then you get a little bit of draft, meaning people are kind of pulling you along as you're solving some of their problems. Then the security issues get addressed as well. And you're not the person, necessarily making people do things. They're wanting to do them because they're seeing that there is actual value to people other than the security group. And I think that's the give back model is really powerful. And if you can figure it out for the places that you're working, you will have natural partners who are willing to work with you, even if it's not their stuff, because you've already helped them solve some of their problems as well. And that's a lot of times in new and maybe improved hardware platforms, or maybe there's been things that really have been driving them kind of crazy, and they're using the security team to get some of those things done. Well, then they take a step back and go, hey, these security guys, I thought it was going to be worse, but it's really kind of good to partner with them. They can get things done that maybe I couldn't all by myself. But that starts to build that team so that when the security team really does need their help, they pick up the phone and they respond because there's a partnership and it's a fair trade between, expectations between different teams.
So how do we stimulate that? Does it work if executives sort of push that down from the C level? Is it somebody? How do we get there? I guess who needs to make the first move in your experience?
I think the security team needs to take that olive branch forward to the groups inside manufacturing and begin starting that dialogue and conversation. I think that IT needs to come along too, as well, but I think it is a security responsibility to begin to build the coalition of the willing. I think it is senior leadership that also needs to demonstrate that they're aligned, that those three organizations, plus some of the other groups that are engaged in the manufacturing environments, are all aligned that, hey, we don't exactly know how to figure this out, but we are going to stay in the same lifeboat together until we get it all together and begin to figure it out, and that we are going to work together. Although maybe it's a weird experience because we haven't worked together before, we're gonna create a bond here. We call it kind of the North Star strategy, where we're all understanding why we're going in this direction, and we're not afraid to change direction, but we're going to do it as a team. And generally, there is strong leadership out of the security organization, not to push people around, but to establish that shared vision and then drive and help fund it, characterize the risks properly, understand what the threat level is, understand what the security capabilities are in that building in those four walls, and articulate it fairly and openly, transparently.
Absolutely. No, a couple of great points here. And I think what really has driven a lot of that, or from the example you're giving, is it wasn't just about going around, like you mentioned, with that clipboard saying this is what's wrong. It's also about offering input on how to fix it and offering some solutions and working collaboratively to do that. I think that is a huge part of what sometimes we're missing. It's really easy to point out the weak spots, but figuring out solutions is much tougher and brings people together quicker.
It is. It is a much better model to go forward and figure out things together as opposed to telling everybody what they're doing wrong. Like, who wants that person in your committee, right? It's not helpful.
Now let's hear from Mandiant's Paul Shaver to get his take on these silos and how decisions related to cloud networking are impacting the security stature of key data assets and network connections. That's a great point. And when it comes to the lack of that engineering dynamic or that input being sought out, do you feel like that's still because we have too many silos right now? We've got the IT silo, we've got the OT silo. They're not getting together and talking? Or is it just simply we don't have the organic understanding of what those specs need to look like within our enterprise? Is it a little bit of both, or is there one that's maybe a bigger issue there?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's not, the movement towards secure by design in OT is really important, right? So as we're evolving those engineering standards and specifications, we need to be including security into that process. Making sure that your IT and your O teams are getting on the same page and having good open communication and are collaborating. And sometimes that means, some legwork that needs to be done on one side or the other to build some trust and build some relationship. it's still the biggest role that I think we end up playing as security consultants in the OT space. A lot of times we're hired in by the IT security teams, and so we come in to look at this, and the OT people are like, "Oh, we don't want the security thing," or maybe there's some initial resistance, and or vice versa. Like OT says, "Hey, we know that we got to start securing this thing, and we need to get these things lined out." And we come in on their side, and the IT security team says, "Oh, we already have this tool, and we already have that tool, and we would handle it this way," and that might not necessarily work in an OT environment, right? So getting those teams all to the same table and having good collaborative conversation, I think, is probably 60% of what we end up doing in our roles as OT security consultants, and making sure that as you build out the capability in the OT environment, that it is collaborative and cohesive with what is being done already on the IT or the enterprise side.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating because we were just talking about a building block, that being segmentation. How can you put forward a real segmentation strategy without IT and OT working together?
Right.
That just kind of blows me away sometimes.
It's super important.
Absolutely. Paul, I want to talk a little bit about what you do in your role. You're with Mandiant, which is now a part of Google. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit, because that's not a name that people automatically associate with the industrial control system and industrial cybersecurity. Maybe you can talk us through a little bit of your role and how those two companies are now working together.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you spend way too much time online, first of all, same. And second, you need Promo Guy Talk Pills. I'm Rawal, and with Alex, we break down everything happening in tech, digital marketing, and the internet's latest chaos. No boring corporate talk, just real discussions with real opinions. So go on, press play. You know you want to.
Yeah, so I've been here about 5 years. And this OT practice inside of Mandiant has been around just a little over 10 years now at this point, where we've had a team dedicated to working on the OT security challenges with some of Mandiant's clients. So Mandiant, growing up as an incident response organization, and helping customers kind of in their most difficult day through a lot of really bad situations, really has grown into a full service security consultancy, where we take what we learn every single day on the front lines of incident response and breaches and compromises and vulnerabilities, and help customers apply that to best case defensible scenarios for their environments and help them improve their security posture. So now being part of Google Cloud and Google Cloud security teams, I think there's a lot of really interesting advantages. First off, operationally, we're still doing the exact same thing that Mandiant has always done. Day-to-day business, supporting customers, supporting them agnostically, meeting them where they are in their security journey with the tech and the hardware and the resources that they have, and helping them to build a more, like I said, defensible architecture for their environments. That's who Mandiant is. And the awesome thing about being acquired by a large company like Google and becoming part of Google Cloud and Google Cloud Security is we get to keep doing that mission day in and day out, and that hasn't changed. What has changed is kind of the power behind what we're able to do. One of the most interesting things that we're having conversations around right now is we're seeing an evolution of, we've spent probably the last, we're in 2025, right? So the last 14 years, since we all started getting really more concerned about security in OT environments, we have been behind the security curve, consistently behind the security curve. You wouldn't have opened this conversation today talking about legacy equipment if that wasn't still the case, where we're still chasing security capabilities in these environments. The really interesting thing is being part of Mandiant, being part of Google Cloud, and this Google Cloud security, larger Google Cloud security team, is that we're starting to look at security for the migration to OT systems in the cloud, and while we're not, getting a chance to have conversations that are ahead of the curve, right? How are we looking at if we move all of these, if we start seeing all of these OT systems slowly moving to cloud infrastructure and using cloud resources, using AI and leveraging the analytic capability that's offered in hyper converged platforms like Google Cloud or AWS or Azure or whatever it is, how do we really take a hard look at putting security first in that process? And it's really, like I said, after 15 years of being behind the curve, it's really fun to be involved in conversations where we're thinking ahead of that, and get to be involved with, the future state in a way that we probably wouldn't have been without becoming part of Google Cloud. Then you leverage on all the additional stuff that Google Cloud offers, right? So the Google Cloud Security Operations Center, right? We've got Chronicle and Simplify and Virus Total and Google Threat Intel and Mandiant Threat Intel all pulled together into a SecOps platform now, where we can help customers, whether they want to deploy that as their own and stand up their own security operations center and run that, or whether they want a managed solution where we can run that for them day in and day out and kind of manage their tier 1, tier 2 SOC, all the way up through full incident response capability, right? So that all of those tools coming together in the security operations side and what Google Cloud Security and Mandiant can provide together, I think is really powerful. And so on the consulting side, still getting to do what we're doing, but then contributing to those products as well is it's a really fun place to be.
Awesome. Sounds like you guys have a lot going on. I think you're in kind of a unique position to also answer this question. I think one of the biggest misnomers when it comes to the industrial sector is when I put that stuff in the cloud, I'm good. My security worries are over, and forgetting to take into mind the cloud has two sides there. Maybe you could talk through a little bit of some of the things that you deal with and how you help some customers realize that it's a partnership. Both the cloud service provider and the customer need to be working together a little bit there, and some of the things that they should keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It comes back to secure by design, right? The same conversation we just had a little bit ago. If we're gonna take our time and we're gonna really think about moving some of this stuff to the cloud, we need to start with security in mind. Number one, you're moving data that might have intellectual property in it. You're using data that might have sensitive production data in it. And so understanding what those security concerns are, building security into that conversation up front, and making sure that as you're building out your cloud resources and you're establishing the connectivity between your on-prem and your cloud environments, that you're using the right encryption and you got the right key control in place, and all of those things are really critical. And again, that's the really interesting benefit of having the depth of support that we have for these environments is, we've got cloud networking engineers and cloud compute engineers that we can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, our customer has this environment and this is what we're seeing and this is what they're trying to do, or this is what they want to do, and we can get answers pretty quickly on making good security recommendations. So it's the same as everything else. If you're looking at it from it's a critical asset, we need to protect it like it's a critical asset, we need to secure it like it's a critical asset, and make security part of that conversation. It becomes just part of that design process.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest part of what you just said there is that conversation needs to take place up front. Don't wait for something bad to happen. I mean, the hackers are getting smarter too. They're going after those entry points to the cloud. Have that conversation to begin with.
Right. Absolutely.
Continuing this conversation on breaking down internal responsibilities, Rob is back with insight on new developments related to Secure by Design initiatives. Rob, I'd like to get your take on another big topic. We talk about Secure by Design a lot. You were mentioning the vendors, the suppliers being a great resource as well, and helping shore up a lot of these connection points when things are coming in and out of the facility, or talking to different networks, whatever it may be. A lot of times we have this notion of, yes, we have legacy technology within the facility, but when we bring in the new stuff, whether it's a new HMI, a new automation platform, something new, we're good because Siemens or Rockwell or whomever, their stuff is secure, but we're not taking care of both sides of it. So maybe I'd like to get your thoughts in terms of covering all your bases and where we are in terms of that Secure by Design dynamic within the industrial cybersecurity or industrial operational field. Is it in place the way we need it to be right now, or how it could be improved?
Like I do think, I think writing down requirements for vendors to meet is a big deal, right? And I think, net new manufacturing lines that are showing up with a bunch of new technology, that shouldn't come into your manufacturing facility until it's gone through sort of, I'd say, a requirements analysis, like what is it meeting and what is it not able to meet, and kind of figuring out how important are the gaps. And writing requirements down sort of makes them real. Utilizing your procurement team to drive those functional requirements into the contract conversation is a big deal. Look, you may lose on many of the requirements. They're like, we can't do that. We can't. Now you have an idea of what you're about to deploy into your manufacturing facility, and are you happy with the security capabilities you're getting for net new, right? And for stuff that's already there that may be 10 or 15 or 20 years old, I still think there's a great conversation to have with the vendors. What is it that we can do today to shore up the security capabilities of the product? Hey, by the way, we bought from you, right? And don't tell me just go buy 2 new lines, because they're millions of dollars. I don't have millions of dollars to be secure. So you're going to help me figure out strategies to protect these devices that you've developed. And if you're telling me that I've got to do iterative rounds of patching to go from, 1 to version 7, and I have to step through every one of these version upgrades, that's a non-starter as well. So how can I go from 1 to 7 and get all the capabilities I'm looking for and do it as quickly as possible? And then there's a scenario where, look, this is the way this product's going to work. This is the way it was designed in 2001, and you're still using it. It works for you. Let's go figure out a way of securing it in place. And then we talk about the kind of that North Star strategy, where we're going to build a set of security capabilities that help protect devices that maybe can't protect themselves. So we're going to figure out ways of protecting it, and that's going to be a blend of security controls and capabilities. Maybe it's segmentation from the rest of the enterprise, so that you can interrogate a machine from the comfort of your carpeted cube, right? You can't. You just won't be able to. So we're going to protect it. And we're going to say, hey, if this is at the manufacturing network, only devices approved by the corporation can plug into that network. So we're going to do 802.1x where we can, right? And we're going to take all sorts of local accounts and we're going to move them to AD, so we can apply identity protection capabilities on top of these identities. And we're going to ring fence service and process accounts like we do on the enterprise, right? And then for the places where we're going, look, this is kind of a dark spot in our sort of security strategy for manufacturing. We're going to figure out the rest. But now we start taking away, we're start shrinking the attack vectors smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's kind of that pragmatic incrementalist view that I have, where you take advantage of all the things that people don't even need and you just eliminate them, right? Take away all those things. You weren't using them anyway. They're not part of the manufacturing process. We're going to take them away. That shrinks that attack surface. We haven't done anything to you. We're just taking away the stuff you don't use or need.
Yeah. No, that's one of those interesting dynamics that we now with Industry 4.0, the Internet of Things, all that, we get all of this data and we want to make it accessible to everybody to make good decisions. But as a result, we made ourselves so much more vulnerable. To your point, I agree 100%. We need to be more judicious in how we hand out a lot of that access. That's what segmentation is all about. The harder you can make it for the hackers to get into any one thing, the better you're going to be.
Yeah, and I think if you blend that with business needs, everybody gets what they want and what they need, and the attack surface goes down, and the attack vectors shrink, and you're really maximum. And I will say this in general: if you can take a bunch of the IT and cybersecurity tools that are used on the enterprise and bring them to manufacturing, even if they're used differently, then you have that common thread across all we had, at General Motors, we had big labs, big production labs. So you can take all those capabilities that already are used on the enterprise and apply them to these various really special places. you get you're kind of stronger together than apart. You get the IT teams and the cybersecurity teams to work in all three of these areas. It's not unique. It's not special for many of the controls. Some of the controls will be special, and then you can work specifically on those unique controls, like asset management. Right? There's a bunch of there's a bunch of software companies out there that do that specifically for manufacturing, and they're useful. Right? They don't play so much on the enterprise side, so that may be one of those anomaly security controls. But to the extent that you can use the same controls in these different places, I would say you're better off.
Well, the only caveat I would add to that is the same strategies, just don't take a cut and paste approach with a lot of the things you use on the IT side, right?
Yeah, I ran the zero trust game plan at General Motors, and what the enterprise needed, which we called zero trust, what manufacturing needed, which we called zero trust, and what the labs needed, which we called zero trust, were uniquely and wholly different.
Yeah.
The really interesting part about that comment, Jeff, and it really resonates with me, is we didn't do the one size fits all. We tailored all of our security strategy in with the philosophy of zero trust, which means, hey, as I mentioned earlier, should I from a cube in Detroit, should I be able to interrogate a manufacturing plant device in Tennessee? Doesn't seem rational, right? Right, generally. So we took all that network connectivity away. We just took it away. It wasn't in the Cisco tables anymore. So you couldn't go there. But if you needed to go there, we had methods using Silverfort and some other methods to, adaptive MFA. So we knew who Jeff was, and we knew who Rob was, and we fire off these policies to go, okay, yeah, we approve that. And we're just validating that Rob is Rob and Jeff is Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us today. And to catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@IEN.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.